I got the COVID. Several weeks ago, I had COVID, and it was a good time, as you could imagine. I got pretty good and sick, and stayed at home and did a lot of reading. So what I wanted to do is not talk about COVID a bunch. You gotta be bored out of your mind with that whole conversation. But what I would like to do is go through some of the books I've been reading through, and during COVID I had some extended time of reading, so I got to enjoy that. And the book I wanna start with is the one that if you ain't gonna watch the rest of this video, at least watch this one book, because as I'm going through the Psalms, this guy, yeah man, he's the bee's knees. His name is Dale Ralph Davis. Anything you can get that this man has written, Dale Ralph Davis, is gold. Love him. Love his insights, love his thought process. He answers questions that many of the commentators, at least that I'm reading from and stuff, I'm not hearing them deal with. Such a benefit, such a blessing. And in the Psalms, he's got several different books that aren't like exactly in the same series, at least that I've found. Now somebody could inform me and help me out, but this one is called The Way of Righteousness and the Muck of Life. It goes through Psalms 1 through 12. If you're interested in learning the Psalms and knowing them well, a friend like this walking through the Psalms with you is so beneficial. And you'll also find that a lot of what I say is probably stolen from him, or at least a lot of thought processes, because he's so helpful and smarter than me. So I would recommend him, Dale Ralph Davis. Also, another book on a book of the Bible that never leaves my mind, the book of Ecclesiastes. It's in my head, since college. So for over 20 years, the book of Ecclesiastes has kind of been a wonderful plague in my mind that always, my brain goes back to it so often. And I don't know if I agree completely with all the conclusions that are made here by David Gibson. This is a book called Living Life Backward. He doesn't do enough exegesis of passages. He doesn't take apart enough passages for me to know if I'm exactly on the same page with him in certain areas. But as a book, reading through it, so beneficial, so helpful. I just wanted to read a couple of lines here from it. Well, no, that's not the right one. Oh, yeah. The very rhythms of the world are a pointer to what it means to be a part of the created order as a human being. Stop thinking that meaning and happiness and satisfaction reside in novelty and always having something new. What is new is not really new, and what feels new will feel old soon. We know that. At the same time, we continue to chase some new thing as though this thing will give us satisfaction and joy in life. And what a waste of time all of that is. This book, very insightful, very helpful. It says as the subtitle, How Ecclesiastes Teaches Us to Live in Light of the End. And like I said, excellent. Love reading through this. Several of the men at our church have gone through it in a small group and have found great benefit in it as well. So I'd recommend that one to you as well. This book, Owen Strand, blessing. This man is a blessing, and he is a energetic speaker, motivational and exciting. When he goes through the gospel on this book, the risky gospel, or just risky gospel, it says, abandon fear and build something awesome. Man, the first couple of chapters hit me like a 2x4 in the head, man. I loved it. Here's something that he talks about in this book that I thought was something it's kind of been rolling around in my mind forever. And he does such a good job of articulating it. He says, we live in this culture where, in this modern age, where we're encouraged to take serious things unseriously and unserious things seriously. So what he's talking about here is people get very, very serious about sports, like incredibly serious. And a lot of times, if you notice, when you watch a sports center or something like that, our guys are suited. You know, they're wearing the tie and the suit and all that stuff, but we want our pastor to wear a t-shirt. It's that kind of idea. And there's this idea, there's this thing that happens to us. When we stop realizing what's really important and pursuing that, we tend to make trivial things very important. And that's the principle that he's talking about there. Also, here's another great quote out of this. Remember this. Remember to seek and to apply what we've talked about in this chapter as you take practical daily steps to be a conqueror of evil. Sin is a disappointment. Holiness is a delight. Honoring God is the most satisfying work you can perform. He comes at you hard, especially in the first several chapters, and is inspiring and encouraging. And I would tell everybody you would benefit from reading this book on basically not being afraid. Be bold and courageous, stepping forward, knowing who your God is. Wonderful book, wonderful encouragement. Another book, another subject rather, that is always in my brain that I'm always kind of wrestling with and going over, and my constant prayer request. Somebody will ask me, how can I pray for you? Contentment. The war is for contentment. This book, The Power of Christian Contentment by Andrew M. Davis. Excellent. I don't know how to put into words how beneficial this book is. I don't have the right quote even from it. There are so many wonderful lines and so many wonderful thoughts in this. This is a book that I would read a small section of and stop and stew in the thought for a while because I needed to. It was a strong enough thought. It was a strong enough concept that I couldn't just motor through. So it was a book I read pretty slowly. But The Power of Christian Contentment, man, what a incredible truth just that title alone is. And digging into this subject with Andrew Davis, you will find to be a joy to your soul. Can't recommend that one highly enough. Now, in all the critical race theory, all of the discussion about racism and stuff in our country, if you want to read a book that I think is good at capturing a big view and covering a bunch of subject matter, a lot of material, Voddie Baucham wrote a book called Fault Lines. It says the social justice movement and evangelicalism's looming catastrophe. He does such a good job. And one thing I would say as a quote out of this book, just his going through the different flashpoint cases that have caused so much strife in America, it was beneficial. And then he goes back, one of the later chapters, can't remember right now, one of the later chapters, he goes back to President Obama's Father's Day speech from 2008. If you read that in here, if you'll just go back, and you know what, you don't even have to read it in Voddie's book, YouTube it. 2008 Father's Day speech, President Obama. Fantastic speech, and it shows you how much things are changing just since 2008. Wonderful book to help get you up to speed with what's going on. Fault Lines, Voddie Baucham. And also in dealing with racism in America and the subject of slavery and all of the stuff going on with that, we're told often we need to read widely. But most people mean, when they say that, from what I've found, you need to read lots and lots of the liberals. And I've read some of them, and I don't even want to recommend the work because I don't find them to be all that beneficial. I find them to be hateful. But one book that really gets into the history of it, and one book I've never seen anyone say you need to go back and read this one, is Black Rednecks and White Liberals, Thomas Sowell. If you've never read Thomas Sowell, if you've never heard of him, Google this man, watch some videos. He's a brain and he's a wonderful thinker, and he goes back through history. And again, this is another one of those books. I hesitate to even share one particular quote. It's a collection of 5 different essays, so it's not exactly one cohesive thing all the way through. He goes through a variety of subjects. I found this book to be eye-opening and a subject or a side of the subject that most people don't even look at. I've been amazed. The Christian leaders I've talked to, pastors and such, who I'll ask them who they've read on racism in America and stuff, and they haven't even heard of him. They haven't even gone to him as a source. If you're looking at other things like that, there's a podcast called Just Thinking that I would recommend to you as well. Moving on from that subject, there is a book that I'm always reading stuff on youth culture and how we got to be where we are in America when it comes to teenage culture and all that stuff. I've been involved with youth ministry for over 20 years now in one form or another. And so I'm always kind of learning on that subject. If you want to learn how we kind of got where we are, this book by John Savage called Teenage. It's the prehistory of youth culture. It goes from 1875 to 1945. he goes through a whole lot of uncomfortable subjects and really reminds me so much that you're going through this and you're seeing how youth are manipulated and moved throughout the years. How is it that they get where they are? What you find over and over again is that youth want a legitimate part to play in culture. And if there's something you can pull out of this kind of a work in the church, it's that your youth are not the future of the church. They need to understand that they are part of the church now. They're future leaders in the church, but they need to be integrated into the body. They need to see that they have a role to play in the church, that they can be useful, helpful, beneficial, and they can contribute to the work of the kingdom of God. Give them a reason. Show them how valuable they can be, how many different ways they can serve. Be creative in how many different ways you can help them learn how to serve in the church. If in 1875, if in 1945, if more churches would have thought about, instead of just letting the culture capture the imagination and desires of the youth, if they would have shown them how valuable they can be in the church and how valuable they could be as an evangelist and in so many different categories in the church, I don't know what America would be today. But if we can recapture that vision of the teenage years and their usefulness and how vital they are, their energy, their zeal, their love, if we could turn that corner and see that, who knows what our churches would be. I would love to see churches teeming with young people who love Christ, who are excited about that. And most of the time, revivals in history have started with the young. So this book was very helpful to me on that front. Teenage. I've actually read it more than once now, maybe not all the way through. It's a big book, but very insightful in looking back at history to see how did we get to this particular place we are today. And you will find that it didn't start in the 40s. It didn't start in the 50s. It didn't start with the 60s or any of that stuff. It was way before that. Very helpful. John Savage, Teenage. I hope this kind of thing, looking at some books, I'm sure you've got wonderful books you're reading too. Don't think you would probably watch a video series like this if you weren't a reader. That's kind of, what we do. We turn pages. And I hope that this is useful as you try to find what kind of resources are actually worth my time. These are ones I would recommend, and I'm always reading more. So if you got recommendations, pass them along. Thanks for joining me.